It's Yahola Osafke Whitekiller here. We're sitting and having a conversation with Richard Yahola, author of 2 books, Ballad of Barking Water and Arabian Nights. I'd like to share a little time with you. Richard, good afternoon. Glad you're here. How's everything going?
Everything's going great. Glad to be here. Thanks for being invited.
Coming from Edmond, correct?
Yes.
Well, we just wanted to see how you've been spending some of your time in this self-isolation world.
Been just basically doing a little bit of writing, just tossing around some ideas, doing some for possibly another book. I've been finishing up on a children's book, which I've been doing on a collaboration with some work with a book about some Seminole Nation stories and Osafke Nation stories. Collaboration with some work with the Betty May Jumper, and that's getting ready to go into publication here towards the end of 2020.
And the ages group of the children's book you're looking to aim at?
That's going to be targeted towards 5th grade. It's kind of a 5th grade school reader.
Betty May Jumper, you definitely have some history there and some good stories, I'm sure.
Yes, it's been a great honor to work with her and her family on this book of stories.
How did you get that position? How was you able to get involved in that?
Well, I think how I got involved with it was someone had contacted the Seminole Nation Museum. Richard Yahola had asked him about writing some stories, and I had done some work with them in sharing the books I had there at the bookstore, and then we talked about some of the history. And he had contacted me about it and just said, I talked to someone, and he said, I don't know if someone will call you. And maybe about a month or 2 later, I got a call from someone out of New York through Benchmark Publishing. And at the time, it was someone that was working with one of the editors up there about some possibility about some books that they were going to write, which was basically about the Muscogee Creek Nation and the Seminole Nation. And so when I was contacted, they said we were interested in doing some type of work with a book that would focus towards, at that time, 5th grade level. And so they asked me about it, and so I didn't hear anything for about 2 months. And then later on I got another call, and they said, could you put together some stories? And I told them about some stories I'd heard growing up about about the Seminole Nation, but also about the Muscogee Creek Nation. And so I kind of shared some of those stories, and they told me that they had some that they thought were pretty good, and then they had some others that they thought were of interest. And they said, well, what do you have that you may have heard from some type of poetry or something? And so I drew from some poetry that I had from Alexander Posey, who was a Creek Nation poet back in the turn of the 20th century. And there was one that I wrote about why trees grow in the river. And it was over a poem that he had written right before he died in 1908. And so I wrote kind of a little story about that. And that was one of the ones that they took an interest in. And there was another one about something about corn, the lady who had grown corn, and a story about that and the history of the corn. And so both those kind of became stories. And at the time, I said, well, I used to draw cartoons in college. Would you like to see some sketches? I'm thinking, they're not going to use my sketches, so I just want to show them. And so I sent the editor some pictures of my sketches, and I thought, well, I'll just show them what I did and see if they have an interest, and because I figured they have their own artists, their own graphic artists they'd use. And so it basically evolved into, okay, we really like this a lot, we'll let you know. And their stories that we had, the Wewoka project, kind of got set aside with them in New York for about 6 or 7 months. Well, about January this past year, it picked back up again, so we're ready to start on again. Oh yeah, by the way, can you give us some sketches in 2 days? And I hadn't drawn in 40 years. And so I had to get out my pen and sketch pad and had to go to Hobby Lobby, get some pencils, some #1 pencils and sketch pencils, and just start drawing, and didn't work out, had to draw some more. And I worked with some of the artistic directors, and we got together some sketches. So one of the stories that are actually going to have some of my sketches. So I'm excited about that, because usually you get to write, but you don't get to sketch. So I'm excited about kind of getting to do both sides of it. And I think the best part is being able to collaborate with someone with Betty May Jumper, just the historical impact she's had with the Florida Seminoles and just the Seminole Nation, just in its entirety, just the impact she's had for so many years.
So with this outbreak that we have lately, we've been putting a little bit more pen to paper, or is that?
Yeah, just doing that some and get finished up with that and get everything to that publisher with that and just I've been trying to toss around some other ideas, but I don't have anything as far as any other story like, okay, I know where this next story's going, just write down some ideas right now.
You grew up in Wewoka. Can you tell us a little bit about those years?
Yes,
Where you came from?
I was born and raised in Wewoka. My family had, my dad's side of the family, the Yaholas, had their allotments out by Cromwell with the Muskogee Creek Nation, and that's where their allotments were. So my father and his dad and my great-grandfather all was raised in the Cromwell area. And so eventually my father moved our family and settled in Wewoka, and that's where I grew up at, went to high school at, and lived there until I graduated from high school, and then left Wewoka and went to college. But I pretty much came back and forth off and on for the last 35 years pretty regularly, visiting family and friends.
You had some interesting neighbors of Seminole lineage. Who was your neighbors?
Ed Tannion, Chief Tannion back in the 70s. And I remember a lot of times have a lot of cars parked out in the backyard and then the alleys in the front yard there on 14th Street. And a lot of times there would be kids over that come over. We'd get the overflow at my house and we'd play basketball in the yard and had a lot of good memories. They were great neighbors. Good memories.
What have you been reading lately? What are some of the reads you've been reading lately?
I'm trying to think some of what I've been reading lately. Honestly, I think what I've been kind of reading more than anything else is I've been reading some books on. I've enjoyed some of the books about Will Rogers. I've read some of the books of him. There's been a lot more written about him, not just books about his entertainment or his movies, more about Will Rogers, the man. That captures a lot of history of the Indian Territory. Another books I've been reading a lot of has been about Alexander Posey. I've read some. I enjoy his poetry because he wrote about his times, but also he wrote about some of the things that were going on back during the turn of the century. He wrote some books called The Letters of Fuss Fixico, which were basically kind of his way of writing in the vernacular of someone who was a turn of the century Alati, and they wrote in kind of the way they spoke, and they kind of wrote in how they saw government kind of taking over from the tribes, the new laws taking over at that time, and being kind of taking over what they had, and some of it's amazing some of the work that they had back then. It's real humorous. Just I can understand why they call a lot of those writers they're satirists and humorists, because they really poke fun at the government. They poke fun at the way city life is, government life, for people who pretend to be something not to not. And it shows up in a lot of their writings.
Don't you find that a lot of those satirists of those days, if they were placed in this time, that they would probably get wouldn't get the humor as much? I mean, the folks they're very sensitive these days.
I like how you say that they would get it these days, because everything's so politically correct. Everybody's so sensitive, and I wonder if a lot of them just couldn't get their work out. They couldn't get their criticisms out because someone would be offended by that. Somebody who supported the people that they were criticizing, but the people that liked, like the Fuss Fixico, that they were pretending to be like, well, yeah, he's got it exactly right. He understands what we're going through. So yes.
If times were hard, they would just get up and leave. And not like those days of staying put. We get reports daily of people leaving the state of Oklahoma from this virus. Would you ever flee Oklahoma?
I went to Texas for 20 years and just came back in 2011. And one thing I learned when I was gone was, when I was in Texas, I'm an Oklahoman. I maybe I didn't know who I was when I left, but I knew who I was when I was there. and I realize this is home. And it's like sometimes you go somewhere as much as go someplace else to realize your roots. And I think I really appreciated Oklahoma more than ever when I was gone, and that's what brought me back and makes me want to stay here. And just maybe we don't have all the advances that other states have, maybe the industry, or we need more jobs. I'd like to see the economy better, but I do like here as far as the people, the friendships you have here. We're a little bit slower paced about how we are as far as appreciating life, appreciating each other.
With all this virus going around, a lot of places are closed, and being in Oklahoma, what would you consider to be an essential place to stay open? What would be on your essential list of places to stay open?
Definitely the grocery store, because we need to get food. Gas station, trying to think what else that I would see as far as being essential. I would think as far as other places that we need is that I think something about we need parks. We need some place for people to exercise, or to some place where people can have some place to work off this tension, this anxiety that we have inside, or places where the kids can go out and play. And I don't know how that plays into the coronavirus or whatever, or even if it's just go out to take your own toys out to play or something like that. Some place where you can go out to do things, because I think being quarantined inside a house. And I'm not a medical expert on that. I think that is tough, because I have friends that say my kids are just going stark crazy being in the house. Mm-hmm. And that's just really tough, everybody being just kind of sequestered inside.
How do you see Oklahoma being transformed from all this once it's over?
Talked to a lot of friends about that. I do believe once this is over with, there's going to be a new normal. I think there's going to be things that come out of this just from a working side in my job, working for the state as a manager, to where before this, being at home, telework, we all had offices to go to. We all went to offices 8 to 5. Maybe we need to revisit that. Maybe we don't have to be in an office and work 8 to 5. Maybe some of us can work out of our houses and then come to maybe an office space occasionally to work at times. That's what I'm wondering about, is that do we need all these offices to go to in the future? Because you have things like Zoom, you have Google Huddle, you have FaceTime, and I wonder if some of those things will take over that, as far as, maybe we'll get some of these things done. And I've talked to people I work with, and they go, this is fun, but I still like being with people. And I miss being with people. So, I know it's going to change, but I don't know how much. So.
It's been kind of interesting to see a spike in appreciation for people who run the daily things, the things that we take for granted. Delivery, nurses, truck drivers. What does this change your perspective on those folks?
I think as 9/11 changed it with, and also with the Oklahoma City bombing with the first responders, this is going to change. Is changing with the first responders for the medical personnel, the people who have been on the front lines to see people who are the people who have kept the essential businesses open, who put themselves at risk. The people who are basically running the, keeping our state agencies going. I think there is just as much hailed as heroes, or as being putting their lives on the line as anybody else, because this is as the president describes, it's the invisible enemy. And it just, every time you look in the news, it's like there's thousands more each day getting this virus, or this COVID. So
Are there everyday parts of your life that it's going to change on your end, you think?
What?
Like, do you think this will be the end of the handshake?
That's a good question. It could be. I mean, it could make it where it could change that could be a big change on that. You got a good point. I do wonder sometimes if it could change us for large gatherings of people. I mean, even if you hear some people say, like large gatherings, like large athletic venues, there's been some people talk on the news. Well, in the fall when football starts, when we get thousands together in the stadium, it's going to be like we're going to get back into a regular routine again. I'm not going to say it's going to be as if nothing happened, because it'll never be like that. Mm-hmm. But maybe it won't. I mean, there's got to be a little bit of doubt there, and I mean, it's got to make you think, hey, you're with all these people, and there's not going to be that 6-foot rule in place. How are we going to handle this? And I mean, yeah, large crowds, lots of people, and we're not to the point where we're saying we know how to get this permanently stopped yet.
I know the Seminole Nation's implementing protocols and procedures. As someone who writes for the Seminole Nation, what are your thoughts about the current political climate of the Seminole Nation, or do you follow it?
I haven't followed it a lot, honestly. I don't know a lot about it to make a good comment or assessment on it. I sure don't.
But the books that you write, where did you start writing them? What was your inspiration for writing these books?
Honestly, the first book was Ballad of Barking Water, and honestly, I was going through probably about 7 years ago. I was going through just a personal challenge in my life, and I was looking for a healthy way to deal with that personal challenge. And I had a couple routes that could have dealt with that, and I thought, okay, how can I find a healthy way to deal with this? And that was my healthy way. It was almost like, hey, I need to find a way to put my soul and energy into something that can be positive, because of some things that had been happening in my life that I needed to deal with. And that was it. And it was like, okay, this is kind of my 120,000 words to say, okay, I'm getting this all out. I'm putting it all on paper. Whatever I'm dealing with this energy, I'm going to lay it all out. I'm going to change whatever frustration I have into these words. I'm going to try to be as eloquent as possible and put it into a story. And the story wasn't my frustration. The story was just, okay, it was the energy. Just, okay, I'm going to do this.
Tell us about that first step, when you took your first step into the unknown. What was that like?
The first step into the unknown is that, honestly, I think it was focusing on the beginning of the book was easy, because I wanted to do something that had kind of an epic element to it, kind of in the way that maybe like a Larry McMurtry book might have to it. The book that he had, like The Cattle Drive, I can't think of the name of the book right now. Lonesome Dove. Instead of having a cattle drive, I'm going to have this life that we're going to fall through, and it's going to fall that way. But also, I wanted a little bit of just kind of what they call Southern Gothic touch to it, like To Kill a Mockingbird, mm-hmm. where you have a little bit of just a little bit of danger, there's a little bit of a bad guy in it, a little bit of something scary happens in it, and a little bit of just, there's just a little bit of, there's some problems with this, there's some people that's going through some really scary times in it, but there is some resolution towards the end of it. And I kind of wanted to have some of that, because I really love To Kill a Mockingbird, and I loved what Harper Lee did with that book.
I like that one part in the story. It's early on when it's talking about going to the underground tunnels, and we have some caves in this area. And being from this area, that was one thing I was thinking about, is how I felt when I was going into those caves, descending that into it. It's the first thing when I first read that. The tunnel section was something I was like, oh, okay, now you got me.
Wow. Well, and after the book was written, I talked to some janitors at Wewoka High School and said, hey, there's tunnels in this high school. There is? I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. So it was fun to do that. But yeah, that's great.
the characters that you have in we'll go with Ballad of Barking Water. Where did you draw from them?
There was just kind of a wide variety of different people. Some of the characters in the book was just a combination of different people I knew from growing up in Wewoka. Some people, like, it was just kind of a combination of just several people that I knew, and I just kind of put them into some of the individuals. There's a couple of people that were like in the book. There was a man named Mutt Miller that was a beloved figure that I knew back in the 70s and 80s. Was a scoutmaster, and he was one of the first curators of the museum, Seminole Nation Museum. And there was a character named Coach McKellop, and he was my inspiration for that. I kind of made him and I kind of remembered him being a scoutmaster, and he was kind of my inspiration for that. Also, there were some other characters in the book that was back when I was in high school. There was this, when we used to buy athletic leather jackets, there was this man named John Dunlap, and he had John Dunlap Sporting Goods. He would travel station wagon to all the high schools and size up the leather jackets with his little measuring tape. And so I made him this character in the book. He sold leather jackets out of a station wagon, and I kind of inspired by that. And I'd worked at a military museum in Oklahoma City back in the 80s, and we used to have several men in the museum, and it was a great time to be there because I had a lot of World War II veterans that were there, and they would share stories about World War II and being there and the people they met, and some of them would go there and they tell stories. Well, I met this movie star in Hollywood, and I danced with Greer Garson at the Hollywood Canteen, or I danced with Joan Fontaine at the New York City Canteen, or I fell in love and had a double date with Jimmy Stewart and his girlfriend in Baltimore. And it was like you had all these stories, and some might have been exaggerated, but they were fun to listen to. And so I got some of that from some of the others, so that was some of those characters that I used as far as being inspiration. And some of the other characters that were in the book, like Fern, not the main character, but the other one, I had a music teacher, and she was kind of a little bit, I don't know, dim-witted, or just kind of a little bit dingy. And one time we would have like a music practice at her school, and she'd go and goes, it's canceled, I forgot my music today. And so she kind of reminded me of that play that I had a long time ago. So that was the inspiration for that.
It's a very good read. Tell us a little bit about the Arabian Nights book you have in front of you. Where did this inspiration to come, and what's your process on writing a book such as Arabian Nights?
Well, Radio Nights was kind of a spin-off a little bit. I would call it kind of just a pre-sequel to Ballad of Barking Water. In the funeral home scene in the first book, Ballad of Barking Water, there's a police chief named George Osmond. Well, George was a police chief, and he was taking the main character Sally in there to identify this person who's deceased. And so basically this police chief, and he has a real small role in the book at the time, in Ballad of Barking Water, and later talks about him in the book some. Well, I thought, well, I'm gonna just give George kind of a life of his own. So basically, where Ballad of Barking Water kind of ends in 2000, this book kind of ends in about 1981. But George is in his late 90s, and so I kind of give him his own life, or his own story of his own, but it backtracks. And so what I make him into being is the last living territorial Seminole Nation light horseman, policeman. And so I kind of start his story as basically being, he's history because all the tribal territorial light horsemen before 1907 are all dead. And here's this man in 95 years old, and he would have been about 18, 19 years old. Well, he was a light horse policeman. And so this researcher from Florida State University and this police officer from Wewoka, Hayward that is in Valley Barking Water. They go find him out in the rural east of Wewoka, and I make it a town called Rock Island Bend. Is where I make him living at. And so they find him and they want to talk to him about his history, and he'll talk to him about his history of being a light horse policeman, but also this mythical creature, this mythical Seminole who is titled the warrior. He's the Seminole Nation warrior, and basically he's immortal. And he's lived since the days of Andrew Jackson and Osceola, and basically he's never died. And he's got the souls of multiple men, and they're asking about this mythical creature, person. And so they go and talk to him about him. And first time they go see him, he says, "I don't want to talk to you." He slams the door on, he goes to the porch, pulls a gun on him, and he's in his shack, and he says, "Y'all need to get out of here. I don't want to talk to you." And so they leave unsuccessful, and they shut their books and walk away, and he goes in the house, and they come back about 3 days later, and he's kind of out there, and he's kind of quarantined like we have quarantine now with the coronavirus, but this time bringing coffee and Long John donuts. And when you're 90 years old, you don't go to the bakery often. Donuts, coffee's kind of entices you a little bit. And the first thing he says is, instead of "get out of here," he says, "Are they maple or chocolate?" And they go, "They're chocolate." And he shuts the curtain real quick, and he says, opens the door and kind of effective. He says, "You come in," and he starts grabbing donuts. He says, "But that doesn't mean you get your story. I'm just getting my donuts." And then the friendship begins. And so it starts out. He's unlikable. He's wounded by life. He's been beaten and bruised by just a lot of events in life, just a lot of setbacks. But through all these negative things, you start seeing just this really good guy come through. And so that's part of the story. And then later on, he has a talk radio show at nights. That's where the title Radio Nights comes in. He has a night radio talk show from like 11 till 5 in the morning. And I make it at this fictional station in Wewoka. And it's there that one night, these outlaws dump out this elderly Seminole man named Louis Osceola in the front lawn of this radio station. And he goes out there and helps this elderly Seminole man, carries him to the radio station. And this Louis Osceola, he eventually realizes they have a past together, going back before statehood. And through the book, they become friends, and through their friendship, George realizes this mystery they have that they share together. And what's funny is this: Louis has a historical impact in his life too that comes out in the book later on towards the very end. You realize about him. And his is, he's the last person that was whipped in the Seminole Nation whipping tree before statehood.
Wow.
So they had crossed paths some 40, 50 years later.
Sounds like an interesting read right there. And again, these books are available on Amazon, if I'm correct.
Yes, they're available on Amazon, and yes, and at the museum.
Museum.
And yeah, yes. Yeah.
Who would you, I asked you earlier, offline, who did you have starring in some of these movies?
Well, I'm trying to think here. If I was to do someone, he's since passed, if I was to have someone for George, I'd have someone probably like Darren McGavin, who was in Night Stalker. I kind of like his curmudgeon attitude. I liked him quite a bit. As far as the person who would be the Louis Osceola, Will Sampson, I like someone like him, kind of soft-spoken, but has a presence about him. For the other book, the John Harrison, I liked Sam Elliott. I thought when I think of Sam Elliott being him, the custodian that's kind of soft-spoken, unassuming, but has a big role, I think of him. And probably Sally, probably like a Gina Davis type, something like that. And then, and then working there was Alice Brown Davis, the chief of the Civil Nation. I can't think of a gift to play for her, but So yeah, that's a few of the characters I can think of. So
You worked at the Kojak. I talked about that a little bit offline earlier, and in some of your years as a counselor, I believe.
yes.
You can share a little bit of information. What have you gleaned from that, and how's it influenced some of your writings and processes?
That's what brought me back to Oklahoma. They started the Department of Rehabilitation Services started a project where I worked with the Kojak in a partnership with Office of Juvenile Affairs to work with kids, the juveniles there as they transitioned out, and helping them with jobs and job placement, and also with training once they transitioned out of custody. And so I got to work with a lot of the youth while they were there, in custody. Some would be there for 6 months or 3 months or a year. Some were there 2 or 3 or 4 years. And so I got to see them while they were there, and also as they left. And I think what helped me was I wrote these books. Is I got to be in a lot of the meetings they had. I got to be in some of the times when they would have grand staffings. I got to be in there when they would hold the kids accountable. And some of the youth that we saw there, I mean, we had them from 13, 14 years old all the way up to at 19 years old. They've got to be exited out. But usually about 18 and a half, most of them were exited out of the youth juvenile system. But you got to see all kinds of levels of insight into them taking ownership of their actions. Some really felt bad on what they did, and what would happen was some that you thought, there's no way they're going to take ownership. This is hopeless. They're not getting it. They'd leave, and you'd hear stories that they were doing well, being successful, and other kids that you thought, oh, I'm connecting with them. They're really doing well. You'd hear about them on social media, on the news, and they were arrested for murder. They were arrested for robbery or kidnapping, and you'd think, you know what? I just didn't get to them. I didn't help them like I thought I did, and we worked so well together. And you can't help but kick yourself thinking, what did I not do? And I tried to help them so much, and you just realize that when they got out there, they were following they were making bad choices, following people that they shouldn't have been following, and that following just seems like that always got them back into trouble again. And that's really tough because a lot of them made choices that they were there for a long time. And I talked to them a lot about, hey, this is that you're going to get a chance again if you stop here. And they go, oh yeah, I'm going to stop. And some did and some didn't. So.
There was always that one that did listen.
Yeah, and that's what made it worthwhile. Yes. Yeah.
Any final thoughts?
I just think from writing the books, I think it has helped me to understand basically a lot about people, and I think the first book with Ballad, Bark and Water, I think one of the things that I picked up from it, and sometimes it takes a while after you finish writing it to realize, okay, what was it that you got out of it as writing the book? I think that one was, never underestimate the impact of what lives you can touch by what you do. And on this one, I think what I got from this book is with the main character, George Osmond, was he had been wounded in law enforcement. He had been shot. He had lived most of his life being threatened by people he had arrested who vowed to pay revenge on him. You had instances where he, his wife had left him, and all through that, despite all these conflicts he had a forgiving heart. And he still saw the good in people, and he didn't give up on others. And I think that's the thing I got from this most was that you have this light horseman, and just he was part of something that was really, really good, great, and it made an impact. And I think that's what I got from that was just that, despite being wounded, being broken, there's always so much good that we can do for other people, and that's what I got from George.
Richard, thank you for coming by today, and it's a great metaphor for what's going on today.
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate it very much. Thanks for having me.
Look forward to seeing some of your new writings that you're going to be coming up with, and
well, thank you.
And, wish you the best.
All right, well, thank you very much.
That concludes the Seminole Nation Radio Show. Whitekiller. Mado, Adam Chihi Chavis.